If you've spent any time on YouTube engaged in the atheist versus theist debates, you've no doubt noticed that atheists like to decorate themselves with words like thought, think, reason, logic, intelligent, free, and so on. The message is clear. They think they're smarter than you if you believe in God.
He's back. That's right. VenomfangX has made a new video for the YouTubes, and it's a doozy. All right, Sean, let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. For those of you who don't know him, Sean, aka VenomfangX, was a bit of a spectacle in the early days of YouTube atheism versus theism. His shenanigans are things of legend, but he's been gone for several years, and now it seems like he's back. Maybe. And I promise, I tried as hard as I could to remove that mechanized flange effect from his audio, searched for tutorials and everything. Couldn't do it. It appears impossible. I'm truly sorry. I tried.
In my experience, atheism on YouTube in particular is less about reasoning carefully and more about insulting the opposition and making themselves feel like they're more intelligent than anyone who disagrees with them. The ultimate irony behind all of that pride is this. The atheist exclusively, unlike anyone else, believes that there is no logic, no reason, no intelligence, no rationality behind existence itself.
This clearly assumes that atheism has a doctrine or a dogma unto itself, that atheism is more than it is. Any reasonable atheist, one whose position is based on reason, hence the term, is one who has examined religious claims and found them wanting. The number of gods they believe in is 0, rather than insisting that all gods are fake. If nobody believes in a god, we're all atheists, because it doesn't require outright denial. But Sean's description of atheism seems to be filtered through an assumption that everybody has a religion, and atheism is one, that it's something followed in the same way as a religious faith. And he's wrong.
Theirs is an existence based entirely on happenstance. Reality just so happens to be such that it allows atheists to exist, but reality did not by way of reason, thought, or logic bring about their existence. So while championing themselves as the bright and shining examples of intelligence and reason and thought, they reject any and all notions that their own existence is the result of any kind of intelligence, reason, thought, or logic.
Reject any and all. Yeah, I'm sure some atheists do that, but it isn't inherent to atheism. Theists have made claims regarding the origin of the universe, and yet they are contradicted by facts, science, history, and even more telling is the requirement of faith, which should be unnecessary if a God really does exist. It's not that we've rejected any and all claims, it's that the claims that have been made don't hold up. I'll believe in a God just as soon as one has been made believable.
To believe nothing is the cause of everything is itself the greatest joke. For the sake of illustration, imagine a conspiracy of vegetarians who decide the only way to stop people from eating meat is to kill all the animals. It's that self-defeating. You cannot, on one hand, embrace the benefits of thought, reason, rationality, and logic, and on the other hand, reject any and all notions that reason, rationality, logic, and thought are at the foundations of reality itself.
Thought. I don't know any atheist who thinks that thought is part of the basis of the universe. This is just further evidence that Sean thinks that atheism is just a godless religion, that he's filtering atheism through his own worldview before analyzing it. What he fails to realize is that, while logic and reason are systems of thought, the universe itself is not so much logical as it is regular. The universe follows patterns without any need for guidance, and logic can analyze those patterns. If our universe were more chaotic, so too would be our method of reason. The notion that these unguided patterns must have been created by a mind of any sort might seem plausible, but that does not mean that it's factually the case. Your incredulity of A is not evidence of B, and you still must show the existence of your God explicitly in a way which can be critically and independently examined and verified.
You would think that people who are so eager to embrace all things rational, logical, and reasonable would themselves be the ones who embrace the idea that behind existence itself is something rational, logical, and reasonable. However, to the contrary, the atheist is committed, emotionally, romantically, for whatever reason, to the idea that A chaotic, blind, unthinking, unintelligent, unrational process of a meaningless, purposeless nature brought about for no reason at all a universe with specific laws, ratios of elements, and a series of events that brought about, sustained, and flourished an entire world of reasonable, rational, thinking beings who rely on the fundamental rules of thought, reason, rationality, and logic in everything they do.
Ugh, where to even begin? First of all, the only traits that he listed that even come close are unthinking, unintelligent, meaningless, and purposeless, because as I've already said, we have no reason to suspect that intelligence, meaning, or purpose are part of the universe. As for chaos, one need only observe the behavior of the universe to see that anything chaotic slowly moves toward order, or at least a kind of stasis. Fire burns out, a ball stops bouncing, and everything slowly cools, moving to a state of inactivity. But through observation and testing, we also see that what appears chaotic follows patterns as much as everything else. If you roll dice, they seem random due to our inability to calculate all factors, but the material and density of the dice, the height from which they are dropped, the force of gravity, the surface on which they land, etc., etc., the result is based on calculable factors. No intelligence required for the result, and yet the appearance of randomness. And then to claim that these observations, made through testing and logical deduction, have been embraced, quote, emotionally, perhaps even romantically, only further illustrates the religious filter through which Sean has perceived atheism.
And then, on top of all of that, they have the audacity to accuse those who recognize the order and intelligence all around them as being less intelligent than they are for daring to propose that the reason for this reason we see around us is something that itself possesses reason.
But you don't propose it. You assert it, and then insist on faith instead of evidence, and then tell us we're threatened with eternal damnation if we don't fall in line. And even after all of that, we still try to treat your assertion as a proposition. We give you the opportunity to show that your position has a basis that goes beyond mere assertion, and you can't and won't do it. Maybe you don't care for being called less intelligent, Sean, but at the very least you're showing some weapons-grade irrationality coupled with childlike naivete, and you wonder why we haven't just accepted your position sight unseen with respect.
To imagine that reason and logic emerged from a chaotic void, a meaningless sea of cosmic accident, coincidence, chance, and happenstance, is to say that all thought itself is ultimately to no purpose, no virtue, no value, no meaning, no end.
And the universe having no meaning might be uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it's not the truth. And if we don't live in a deterministic reality, and all the evidence suggests that we do, that we may ultimately have no purpose and everything we do is just one big act of improv, that might just be tough noogies. Existence doesn't owe you certainty, purpose, or significance. Cope.
To use reason, rationality, and logic against God is like using a bucket of water to still a flood, or a torch to quench the flames of the sun. To use reason against reason, to use that which is so absolutely from God against God, to use logic against logic, is a madness born in those who have commit themselves to a philosophy and worldview that, despite being utterly irrational, is admittedly emotionally appealing.
Okay, truth time here. I am cutting out a lot of what Sean is saying, mostly because it's redundant. His video is less argument and more rant, and he's repeating himself a fair amount too. As always, link in the description if you want to watch the whole thing, and check up on my honesty and integrity.
I can understand why, against all reason and logic, many would prefer to think that there is no God. It is a comforting thought to those who would, upon discovering that God has been watching them their entire lives, and listening to all their horrific lies against him, would recoil in absolute terror to discover his existence.
Now, why would I recoil in terror? I've never told lies about your God or anybody else's gods. To do that, I'd have to know the truth first. And if a God exists, he, she, it, or they have not been particularly forthcoming with the facts, and, as I keep saying, most human claims of a God's existence insist on faith instead. If a God showed up and said hi, I'd probably want to know why all the hiding. Indeed, I'd love to discover a God who used having faith as a test, and you passed if you rejected it, looking for evidence instead. Oh, I'd still think that was kind of obnoxious, but at least my integrity would be considered a virtue. But terror? No. No, I don't think so. Not unless this God was Godzilla, ripping up the world with reckless abandon. That's a God that would probably scare me just a smidge.
The atheist, upon being confronted with these self-evident facts, will either admit their foolishness and embrace the truth, or alternatively, will turn on you, being unable to respond with reason or logic, since in doing so they lend credibility to the theist's argument.
Oh crap. Take cover! Nobody lends credibility to someone's position by their response unless they're presenting arguments and evidence in its favor. If someone makes an idiotic argument, one that's provably untrue, and someone else calls them a dumbass, that doesn't make them any less wrong or any more correct. The one tossing out insults might lose the respect of anybody observing the exchange, or who knows, they might be cheered on. But if your argument is, ha ha, you called me names, I win, you are being irrational.
In conclusion, to construct a worldview without God, any notions of reason, logic, or rational thought becomes absurd. However, we can reason that the universe must be, by necessity, the result of an intelligent cause, as an effect cannot be greater than its cause. The universe, the effect, has intelligent beings within it. Therefore, whatsoever caused the universe must of necessity be of greater intelligence. Otherwise, the intelligence of the effect, the universe, is greater than the intelligence of the cause, violating the laws of cause and effect.
The only people I hear claiming that the cause must be greater than the results are theists, but this concept is deeply flawed. For one, it's too simplistic. Does any effect have only one cause? And what is the effect? Cause and effect goes far beyond A becomes B. If you look up the concept of synergy, you'll see that we find examples of sums being greater than their parts all over the place, from within nature to business teams and so forth. And it all depends on what we mean by cause and effect. A single match can start a forest fire, for example, but the universe is allegedly a zero-sum game, and the potential for energy release through burning already existed, just in a different form. This notion that only a greater intelligence can cause a lesser one is simplistic and naive to the point where you almost can't even call it wrong. It's borderline nonsensical.
Therefore, theism, not atheism, is the most logical, thoughtful, and reasonable position to take. Theism can properly account for why logic and reason exist at all. Therefore, the rational view that accounts for our ability to reason and use logic is the position that admits that at the basis of reality, the foundation of all that exists, is something intelligent, reasonable, rational, and logical. Theism.
But you can prove that absolutely anything is logical, rational, reasonable, and true, provided you never have to show any actual evidence for it. Because as it stands now, the concept of God is completely made up. We have nothing we can study that doesn't boil down to human-told legends. I might as well prove that the Force is real, using nothing but Star Wars movies to prove it. Actually displaying the Force outside the movies, or I suppose video games, novels, comics, whatever, is not a requirement. Apparently. As long as the saga says so, the Force is real. If that doesn't sound reasonable or rational to you, then maybe you can start to see how your religion sounds to us.
Theism, not atheism, is the most logical, thoughtful, reasonable, and rational view that properly accounts for our ability and reliance on rationality and logic itself, as well as properly recognizes and reasons about the logical rules of cause and effect.
He's not saying, here is a way to test for God's existence. He's saying, here is how I can play with words and concepts to justify my belief and try to make other people believe it too. And he sounds angry, like he has a grudge against atheists. You should hear the redundant stuff I cut out of my response. It sounds, more than anything else, like he's trying to convince himself, like his confidence needs boosting, as he tries to tell other people how wrong they are. Which is why I've turned off my last irony meter. I'm gonna run out of those if people don't donate via Patreon, what with YouTube yanking ad revenue and all. They're not cheap, you know. I don't know whether Sean is back for good or whether this video is just a drive-by, but if he's back, strap in. This is gonna be entertaining. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think. Ignorance killed the cat. Curiosity was framed.